everyone, what's up? My name is Joss and welcome back to my channel, Squibblesreads. It has been a couple months since I have done a reading wrap-up, and I had a pretty decent reading month in October. I totally forgot how much work wrap-ups are, just with like taking notes and trying to remember all my thoughts about every single book. But today I will be letting you guys know what I thought of all the books that I read this month. Let's start with All American Boys by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley. This is a YA novel that surrounds an act of violence that really shook up a community, especially a high school, and two boys who attend that high school in particular. The first boy, Rashad, is an African-American boy who was accused of shoplifting from a convenience store and was really brutally beaten as a result by a white police officer. The other boy, Quinn, is also white. He goes to this high school and he was a witness at the scene of the crime and also caught it on video. He is really struggling because he used to be really good friends with this police officer and kind of looked up to him as an older brother, but also is struggling with what to do with the video. It talks about stuff like, of course, police brutality and using people's names as hashtags and the peaceful protests that may result, and how all this stuff impacts males, especially since both of our narrators are male, and particularly towards the gender roles that are expected of them in society and from their own communities. I appreciated both of their narrative voices and seeing how both of these characters grew through their identities and what they learned from the event. This is a book that will stick with me for a long time, and I did end up giving it 5 out of 5 stars. On audiobook, I listened to Where Am I Now, which was a memoir written by Mara Wilson, who I know from the movie Matilda as well as Mrs. Doubtfire. Mara narrated the audiobook herself, and for me, listening to an audiobook where the author does the narration themselves just kind of adds this organic and vulnerable quality to it. She talked a lot about her mental health struggles and how child acting in particular influenced them, and she also talks about how she came to acknowledge her own privilege and how she kind of fits in with the world and how that's changing and evolving for her. Mara Wilson is really vivacious and outspoken on Twitter, and on this audiobook and just with the narration, I thought that she was just a little bit more subdued, especially in the topics that she was talking about, and I just wanted to see a little bit more of that Twitter Mara come out, but I still really enjoyed it, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Next, I read I See You by Claire McIntosh. This is a book about a woman named Zoe who sees her photograph in a newspaper one day along with a mysterious website URL beneath it, and a lot of the days after that she sees a new woman's photo in the paper along with the same URL. So the mystery surrounds why her photo is in the newspaper, but also why these women are being chosen and what exactly that website is. Claire McIntosh's other thriller called I Let You Go was one of my favorite thrillers of the year and kind of reminds me of You by Caroline Kepnes, which is totally creepy and another book that I love, but this one in comparison fell flat a little bit for me and just lacked some of that edge. There was also some discussion around the relationship between police officers and victims of crimes, and I can't help thinking that it was just a little bit biased in the way that it was told. It's really hard to pinpoint, but it just seemed like she wasn't really writing from a neutral point, and then I kind of did some research after reading this book, and Claire McIntosh was actually in the police force for like 12 years of her life. Again, I'm not really sure if that's where this bias that I'm kind of sensing comes from, but it may have something to do with that. Overall, I did enjoy reading it, but in comparison to her other novel, I think I liked the other one more, and I ended up giving this 3 stars. The next book I read was one of the books on my Diversathon TBR, and this book is Just Visiting by Dahlia Adler. This is about two best friends, Reagan, who is Caucasian and lives in a trailer park, and also Victoria, who is Latina, and she's also fluent in American Sign Language because her mom is deaf. They're both in the same high school, and they are looking at colleges and deciding where they want to go and what they want to major in. Reagan also has a secret that she's keeping from Victoria and everyone else, so that is a part of the plot as well. First of all, I really loved the representation in this. I thought that it was just weaved into the narration really seamlessly because the plot did not revolve around parts of their identity, but I thought that it was incorporated into a lot of different places. So even though I liked the representation, I did not like the writing style. It just didn't really stand out to me in any way and was super simple, and I enjoy something a little bit more descriptive. Also, this is just like a really personal thing, but I don't love reading about like parties and the college admission process. That's just not something that I am particularly interested in. I mean, to be fair, this is a contemporary and it is marketed for teens around that time in their life, so I totally understand why it is there. It is just a personal preference, so I did end up giving Just Visiting 3 stars. The next book that I read was Dragonfish by Vu Tran. I've talked about this book a few times on my channel in like my currently reading videos, but this is kind of a neo-noir mystery about a Vietnamese police officer named Robert who lives in Oakland. His ex-wife Susie, who left him 2 years ago, has gone missing, and he thinks that her new husband, who is kind of shady and involved in this neighborhood of violence and like smuggling in Las Vegas, he might have something to do with it. I really enjoyed this. This is a really graphic book, so if that's something that you don't like or are uncomfortable with, just be warned about that. Some of the critiques that I've seen of this book is that it's not realistic, along with the other qualms that I have about that word. I don't necessarily think that that's what the author was going for. There was a lot of action in this book and a lot of like tense discussions in people's underground lairs, and I like really ate that up. But there was also this undertone of kind of like sadness and grief and despair that I also really enjoyed. I thought all of these things were portrayed really well. I thought the author did a really good job with it, so I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I read is another thriller called Good Is Gone by Amy Gentry. This is about a girl named Julie who was kidnapped when she was 13 years old, and her sister is the only witness to the crime. We are flash forwarding 10 years, and a woman shows up on Julie's family's doorstep claiming that she is Julie and that she has come back from all these years of being missing. So the mystery kind of revolves around whether this woman actually is Julie, and if not, why is she there? Her mom, Anna, has some doubts and hires a private investigator to figure out if this woman is actually her. So the chapters alternate between Anna, Julie's mom, and also kind of this backstory of a bunch of women that may somehow be involved in Julie's life or may be Julie. That's really all I can say about it without giving away too much more. I really liked getting to know all the different women in all of their different situations and their struggles. I do think that this book could have afforded to be a little bit longer, probably around like 100 pages, because the family, including the dad and the sister, didn't really get fleshed out a lot. They were super one-dimensional characters and more like placeholders. The backstory narratives were also a little bit jumbled and lacked explanation, and there were some things that I had to take at face value, which I found really frustrating because in a mystery, that's not something that I want to do. And with all that being said, I did give it 2.5 stars. The next audiobook that I listened to was You Can't Touch My Hair and Other Things I Still Have to Explain by Phoebe Robinson, who is a stand-up comedian and also one of the 2 women on the podcast 2 Dope Queens. This is like a memoir / essay collection that focuses around topics of race and gender and what it is like for her experience being an African American woman living in the States. I really love this so much. There are a ton of pop culture references. I would really highly encourage you to listen to the audiobook rather than read the print copy because the tone is super conversational and just the language used is really conversational, but that really shines through with the way that Phoebe narrates it. So like I was saying, she talks about her experience as an African American female living in the States and just all the different microaggressions from different people that she comes across. For example, using the word uppity in the workplace, people trying to touch her hair, and also her trying to explain her experience to people of privilege can result in her being assigned to the angry black woman stereotype. I really enjoyed this audiobook. Phoebe is absolutely hilarious, but it also made me realize a lot of things about myself, a lot of things that I still don't know and have to learn, some things that I need to sit down and check. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I also finally finished Arabella of Mars by David D. Levine. This is an art copy that I got at BEA. This is about a human girl named Arabella who was raised on Mars by Martians, so she knows like their language and their way of living, and then something happens and she has to go back to England, and then something else happens and she has to go back to Mars, and the way that she gets back to Mars is by dressing like a male, pretending to be a male, and hopping on this ship of rogue sky pirates. I found this book to be a ton of fun. I also liked the writing style, which was really descriptive, but also somehow kept the action moving as well. I liked the characterization of all the characters, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I read is The Mothers by Britt Bennett. This revolves around a girl named Nadia Turner who lives in Southern California in a very tight-knit African-American church community. She gets pregnant in high school by Luke, who is the pastor's son, and is also struggling with her mother's suicide. We also meet her best friend Aubrey, who is involved in this church community, and Nadia, Aubrey, and Luke, we follow them from their teenage years into adulthood. This was super interesting to me because at the beginning of some of the chapters, the mothers act as kind of like our overseer or our narrator. They are all mothers from the church group. They narrate short little passages, like I was saying at the beginning of every chapter, kind of from a distance, discussing some of the expectations that the group and society have of women surrounding pregnancy, around mental health, around suicide and injury. There is also some discussion of physical injury, and the way that that different things affect people like somatically and viscerally, and a lot of this was incorporated into the descriptions that Britt Bennett used, and that's something that I really liked. Overall, I kind of wish this had been longer. I just really felt like I didn't want to let the characters go. I think this is just stemming from the fact that I was really attached to some of the people in this book. Anyways, I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Up next, we have A Mother's Reckoning, which was written by Sue Klebold, who is actually the mom of one of the perpetrators of the awful shooting at Columbine High School. I just finished this book, and I am still struggling to put words to it. I think some of the words that I can put to it now are just like grief and self-loathing and hatred and blame and confusion and like the feeling of being trapped. All of those things were conveyed in this book. She also talks about how it was hard for her to access mental health services because a lot of therapists either did not know how to work with her, were not comfortable with working with her, or just like didn't want the stigma of working with her. She also talks about her anger towards her son and how she just wishes that she could have done more, or if there were just any warning signs, and just not being able to figure out how to live with herself. This is a really, really tough read, and I honestly didn't know how to rate it, but just kind of looking at the structure, I think that she did a good job delineating between where she was talking about things that were coming up for her and things that she was trying to talk about in a more professional and clinical sense, where she would refer to professionals that she's dealt with in the past or adding a citation, which I thought was really smart. I did not know how to rate this, but it did really deeply affect me, and books that really deeply affect me I do rate really highly, so I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Finally, I read V.E. Schwab's A Darker Shade of Magic. A lot of you have probably already heard of this book, but in case you have not, this is a fantasy book set in a world with 4 different Londons: white, red, gray, and black, and the only people that can travel between them because it's been closed off are people called Antari. So our male protagonist, Kel, is one of these Antari, and his main job is to deliver messages from the royalty of Red London to the other different Londons. He also kind of has like a little side gig where he like sells and trades artifacts and kind of smuggles them between the different Londons because they are closed off and people are super curious about them. Something happens with one of these artifacts and Kel meets our female protagonist, Lila Bard. Together they have to grapple with a particularly evil bunch of people. So first of all, I really liked the way that the plot moves and the way that it was constructed. I also really just liked the general premise of the world and the magic system. Where I wanted more was in the building of the characters. I am a person that likes when the authors show and not tell different facets of characters, but in this case I think that we were neither shown nor told. So Lila is another strong female protagonist with a dark past, and we're not really told very much about her beyond that. Kel is kind of a special guy with a special ability that has some sentimental value attached to his family for a variety of different reasons, but again, not much beyond that. There was also a very clear delineation between good and evil, and just personally I like my characters with a little more gray morality. I find that when characters are a little bit more gray morally, it adds different facets to their characters and makes them less like placeholders. Overall, I was pretty let down because I did enjoy the plot and the magic system, but not much else, so I did give this book 2 out of 5 stars. That is it for this video. Please let me know what your guys' favorite book that you read in October was down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!